Hello and welcome to 6th part. Today I'm gonna continue the story What If Deku Had the Infinity Gauntlet Part 2. If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Izuku sat in class and went over his notes on quirks. He was trying to find the right mix of traits that would work together to make a stone. Hydrokinesis can change the shape of water molecules, and telekinesis can move things around on Earth. The conversion quirk lets it work on all kinds of Earth, even metals, and a bunch of amplifier quirks make it powerful. The teacher called out, "Midoriya," which broke his train of thought. "Yes," Izuku replied with a sour breath. The teacher said, "If you're not too busy, why don't you answer the equation on the board?" She knew he wasn't paying attention. Izuku said, 42, without even reading the board. "Sorry, that's not right," the man said with a strutting grin. "It's actually 45, but you were pretty close," the teacher told her. The other students laughed as they saw the genius make a mistake. "Nope, 42, Izuku said. He got up from his desk and went to the front of the room. Even though the teacher told him to sit down again, the boy with green hair picked up a marker and wrote 42 on the board anyway. She said, "That's the answer. You said 45, but this is the only way to make it 45. Izuku erased some numbers and symbols and put in new ones. "There, the answer can now be 45, he said with a smirk as he underlined the new answer to make it stand out. "You're the teacher, so please do your job right," Izuku told the man as he went back to his desk. The man looked over his textbook and paled a little when he realized he had written the equation backwards. The teacher clenched his teeth as he lashed out at a child in his own class. "That's right. Thank you, Midoriya." He was even made fun of by the other students when the bell rang to end the lesson. "Alright, class dismissed. Turn in your assignments on Monday." Finally, Izuku sighed as he put his notes away. He hated this class the most because he was already ahead of the lessons but still had to go every week. It meant that he had less time for lab work and less time to work with the lead. With his bag in hand, he left the room, ignoring the bad teacher's harsh look. It was supposed to be one of the best schools for people who aren't superheroes in the country. Make the teachers better. Glare all you want. One thing he learned in middle school was, "I'm used to it. Don't care what other people thought of him." He didn't have any friends at this school, but he didn't mind. It wouldn't have made a difference once his machine was done. Speaking of that, Izuku had made some progress with it. Things were going well with the space stone. Izuku got a sample of Kurogiri's blood because he asked for it. The man wasn't sure at first, but Sensei's suggestion made him change his mind. He was able to find the weird parts in the genetic code, take away their different parts, and then put them back together using a complicated scanner that he built. To make it stronger, he took Kurogiri's warping quirk as the base, took away the mist conversion, added the flash warp quirk, and then multiplied it by 4. Now Izuku almost had a superpower ready to be turned into a stone. He was almost done, but there was one thing he was missing. A hero named Rocklock who had a very cool quirk. He had the power to lock things in place in space. Izuku asked for a sample of his blood so that the space stone could have his quirk. He was lucky that he already had a plan to get it. The time stone was being tough. He changed a lot of things about the genes to make them stronger, but the computer simulation always failed. Izuku still didn't know what important thing was needed for that one. The teen was having a terrible time right now because of the reality stone. Izuku believed it would be easy. Just put together a bunch of telekinesis and matter manipulation abilities and then add a bunch of amplifiers. It's not that easy after all. It wouldn't work on the computer every time he tried to make it using his formula, no matter what he put together. He almost had one, but it fell apart because it would be too hard on the body. A quirk that could make things not weigh anything might ease the stress. That girl at UA. Her name was Okako Uraraka. Izuku remembered going over the video clips he took during the USJ attack and the clips he saved from the sports festival. She had an anti-gravity quirk, he thought. The girl was the only one in the class whose quirk could help him. Oh, if only he could get some blood. Izuku also liked how she stood up to Katsuki Bakugo in her festival match, which his weaker self would never have been able to do. That girl would make a great hero one day. He was interested in a few more students, though. Tenya Iida was a boy who had a strange trait that gave him engines in his legs and let him move very quickly. This student was the one who left the facility to go tell the UA, so Izuku didn't get much information on him. Faculty. Then there was the time he lost badly to a girl at the festival who used a bunch of homemade gadgets. In a way, he won because she gave up, but Izuku knew he had lost because Hatsume could have easily beaten him but chose not to. Tenya was good in some ways and could have been a real hero. This is the kind of hero Izuku wanted to make. After that there was Shoto Todoroki. Izuku almost drooled over this guy because his quirk was so cool. After the sports event, he did some research. He turned out to be the son of the second-ranked hero Endeavor. On top of that, he had both an ice and a fire quirk. Isuku didn't understand why he didn't use his fire. If Todoroki had used it, he could have beaten Bakugo in the final round of the sports festival. But for some strange reason, he didn't, so Bakugo beat him and took second place. Shoto, on the other hand, could do almost anything if he just used his other quirk. He could be the best hero one day, and Izuku planned to make sure of it after he fixed up the current hero society. Izuku went outside and toward the mechanics building while adjusting the bag that was over his shoulder. The only course he liked was this one. He could choose to take this class and use his creativity to make things. Also, the teacher was a man with a lot of contacts in the companies that help make gadgets for heroes and sometimes police. Izuku did everything he could to be nice to him and help him be the best student in the class. He had heard that only the best students would be able to do internships at certain consulting firms this summer. What better way to get into the hero system than to work for a company that makes gadgets for it? The teen with green hair knew a while ago that the League of Villains could only take him so far. He would need power and materials that they couldn't give him in the end if he wanted to finish the Infinity Gauntlet. That's the reason Izuku wanted to work for one of these support groups. They might give him everything he needs to finish the project without realizing it. Mr. Kinzoku yelled, "Ah, Midoriya," when he saw his favorite student walk into the workshop. At the tall man with blue hair, Kinzoku-sensei, Izuku smiled big. The teacher had a cool ability. He could join different metals together by combining their different properties. His power only let him bond two metals together, and he couldn't do anything else. "What are you working on today?" the teacher asked as she walked up to the boy's desk. "Well, I just finished my portable force field generator." He had made it months before, but Mr. Kinzoku didn't need to know that. It was one of the first tools he made for his job as a bad guy. It was a small metal disc with a button in the middle that Izuku showed him. When the student said, "Try to hit me," the teacher did what he was told and tried to lightly hit the student. Midoriya only had to press a button to set off the barrier, which stopped the hand in its tracks when it hit a light blue wall. Kinzoku rubbed his hurt hand and said, "That's really impressive, Midoriya." Izuku sighed and said, "Yeah, but it can only take so much force before it fries the power source." It didn't matter to him, though, because he carried around multiple versions of the force field generator in case that did happen. "No, I mean it. For a first-year student to come up with such ingenious designs and inventions is quite an accomplishment," the teacher said proudly. "Especially considering that you're quirkle." "I'm so sorry," Kinzoku said to make up for his mistake. "It's okay, sir, you can say out loud that I'm quirkless. It's not really a racial slur. It should be, though, given how the word is used these days. I've long since accepted that I was born with nothing that makes me special like everyone else. I'll have to work hard to be special and recognized by society as more than just a quirkless person. That's why I want to work for a support company, so I can be a hero by making things that help heroes." Izuku lied straight through his happy smile. He was always said to have an honest smile, so why not use it? "You're very grown up to say that," he wished he knew. It wasn't too busy for the rest of the workshop class. With only one small problem. Mr. Kinzoku cut his hand on a sharp piece of metal by accident. An accident that no one in the room knew Izuku was responsible for. He liked the man, but he had a lot of accidents in class, which is why there were so many first aid kits all over the work area. Izuku quickly got the gauze and bandages to help the teacher because he was a good student. After putting on the bandages, the boy put the bloody gauze in a clean, zippered bag and quickly put it in his pocket. It was too good to miss the chance that Mr. Kinzoku's quirk could bring. Izuku went to the gym after class and stayed there for a while before going back to his dorm room. He sighed and flopped down on his bed to check his phone for messages. Kurogiri texted him to go to the sports supply closet at the academy, which was one of several places they had marked as good places to work. There was also a message from the bartender telling people to hurry because there might be a new employee coming to the bar tonight. He took out his bag again and made sure that the DNA sample that he had gotten from his teacher earlier was in it so that he could bring it to the lab later. Izuku sneaked out of the building and over to the indoor track stadium, where the sports supplies closet was. Izuku checked to see if anyone was following him inside and then sent Kurogiri a message. A minute later, a warp gate appeared in front of him. Shigaraki started to yell at him as soon as he walked through. "What took you so long?" Tamura asked him with a mean look in his hand mask. Izuku said with a mild grin, "Some of us have school, Tamura-san." He put his bag on the bar counter and sat down on one of the stools. His face was still showing because he wasn't dressed as a bad guy in his school uniform, but it didn't matter anymore. Even though Shigaraki and Kurogiri said they didn't care who he really was, Sensei already knew who he was. Most likely because they were using fake names like he did. He said while sitting in the armchair, "The hero killer will be here soon. Whether he agrees to join us or not, I want your analysis on him. So sit there, Keep your mouth shut and don't do anything but observe. Kurogiri left Izuku a soda and said, "Okay." Izuku agreed and took a sip. They finally told him who was coming, and he spit out his drink. "Wait. The hero killer is coming here. The hero killer Stain is going to be here. You're trying to recruit the hero killer Stain." "What did I say about keeping your mouth shut?" Tamura grasped the arm of his chair so tightly that it almost broke. The boy with the green hair said, "Sorry," and then he went back to drinking his drink while thinking. A feeling he had in his gut told him, this won't go well. It wasn't even a strong conclusion. Izuku did know about Stain. Before he worked for small groups in the underground, he heard about him and had been interested in his work ever since. Since the man worked in a dangerous field, Izuku was a little wary of him, but he agreed with the man's message. Not any more fake heroes. It was a lot like his own goal. But Stain only wanted to kill the fakes to get rid of them. Izuku, on the other hand, wanted to make real heroes and just get rid of all the fakes. "He's here," Tamura said. As soon as the portal showed up in the bar, Izuku saw that the monitor screen lit up, which meant that Sensei was watching. The man who came out of the warp gate was tall, muscular, and well-dressed for battle, with knives and swords strapped to his body. He stood up to greet their guest and said, "So you're the hero killer." Stains looked around the room, first at Shigaraki and then at Kurogiri behind the bar. Finally, he looked at Izuku and said, "So you're the League of Villains." Izuku thinks that his age and school uniform made him look confused for a moment, but it didn't last long because he quickly turned his attention back to Tamura. Izuku felt fear wash over him at that very moment. The dark aura around this man was very different from that of Sensei. He was a different kind of monster. "Let me be honest, we'd like to invite you to join us," Shigaraki said. At him, Stain glared. "Join you? And why should I do that? What exactly is your goal?" Tomaru smirked behind his hand mask. "Our goal is very simple. I want to kill All Might and end the society that worships him." Izuku thought to himself, how childish, as he watched the whole thing. He already knew Tamura's plans, and he thought they were stupid and silly, not having any kind of reason or goal. What a child! Stain spat back at him. "What's the point of killing for no reason?" the killer asked as he took out one of his swords. When Kurogiri asked, "Master," he looked worriedly at the monitor screen. All for One said, "Let them go on. An experienced and infamous villain such as Stain will only inspire Tamura to grow and mature." This is bad, Izuku thought as he saw Stain move so quickly that it was almost unnaturally fast. He threw Tamura Shigaraki to the ground and stabbed him in the shoulder with his sword. Kurogiri tried to help him but was stabbed in the arm by a well-thrown dagger. Then Stain pulled the blade out by tying a rope to it and then brought it back to his hand so he could lick the blood and paralyze the mist-covered bartender. All of this took place in a few seconds. Izuku slowly got up from his stool, trying to either run away or get help. He and Stain locked eyes, but Stain didn't say a word. He knew what she meant. Don't move. The League of Villains didn't even pay him, so he wasn't going to fight the hero killer for them. The boy gladly did what they asked. Stain looked back at Shigaraki and said, "I hate people like you," lacking any conviction. The desperate Tamura yelled, "Kurogiri, send him away." "I can't." Kurogiri's mist shook, but it couldn't move or get bigger. "His quirk seems to be stopping me," he said in a strained voice. Izuku began quietly putting together the hero killer's quirk from what little he had seen so far. He seemed to be able to weaken people just by tasting their blood. "Without conviction or cause, you won't survive," Shigaraki said. Stain tried to put his dagger on Shigaraki's neck, but the other person grabbed it with his free hand and quickly broke it apart. He stood back up and asked, "Conviction, huh?" The killer of the hero was just a short jump away. The man snarled, "What a load of crap, as if I'd need something like that." "Our ideals seem to be at odds with each other," Stain said with a smirk. Izuku's eyes got bigger as he said, "But we both want to bring down this broken hero society." That was pretty much the same as his own goal. Thoughts he himself held. Tamura yelled at him, "Leave now, we don't need you." "It was already taken care of here," he said. Now that Kurogiri was free, he turned his glare back at him. He licked his lips when he was done talking and said, "Return me to Hosu. There are still some false heroes I need to take care of." After he left, Tamura finally spoke. He looked at his bleeding shoulder and said, "TCH, and just when my wounds were done healing. I'll show him. Sensei, I need some more nomus." "Do we have more of those?" Izuku saw it. All for One's voice said through the screen, "I'll give you 3. Use them wisely, Tamura." "Please let me go with you if you're going to Hosu," Izuku asked. Because the boy was polite, Sensei said, "Of course you may," and let him go with Shigaraki. "Thank you, Sensei," Izuku said as he bowed respectfully to the monitor. Shigaraki glared at the boy behind his back. The bad guys sometimes got really annoyed by how friendly the boy was. That night as Izuku walked through the dark streets of Hosu City, he asked, "Now then, Mr. Stain, where are you?" He wasn't paying attention to the chaos going on far away. In order to steal the show from the hero killer, Tamura sent some Nomus to wreck the city. That was just what the boy with green hair needed to take his mind off things. He pushed a button on the scouter to turn it on. This increased the scanner's range but also let him see how much power the crazy person had. Izuku smiled behind his mask when he saw 3 signatures far away, a short beat away from the crowd. Who was he killing? When Izuku got close to the alley, he poked his head around the corner to see what was going on. He saw Stain about to kill a UA student that he was interested in with his green eyes. It wasn't a fake hero. Tenya Iida was about to die, and Izuku couldn't let that happen. To kill the boy for good, Stain was about to stab him, but his gut told him to avoid. He jumped just in time to avoid the energy pulse beam that went by the spot he was in. Izuku came out of the shadows and stood next to Iida. "I thought you only killed fake heroes," he said. "Attacking a student? You should be ashamed." "Who the hell are you?" Stain asked the person who came in. "Oh, you want to know who I am now?" The young bad guy laughed. "Back at the hideout, you just stared at me without saying a word." Stain suddenly remembered who this person was as he thought about what had happened in the bar a few hours before. The killer of the hero said, "You're that shy boy in the school uniform who was with the League of Villains." With that form-fitting body armor and white hooded coat, he was no longer recognizable at all. Izuku bowed and said, "Hello, my name is Apotheosis. It's nice to meet you, Stain." Tenya couldn't move as he lay on the ground. His eyes got bigger. "In the USJ incident, this is the bad guy who attacked Bakugo." Stain said, "Well, you're certainly nicer than that Shigaraki brat. Now step aside so I can deal with that child." At the very moment Izuku said, "Yeah, I'm afraid I can't do that," a sword slashed down on him. The recent training he did helped him react faster, so he was able to turn on his force field generator. The hero killer's sword hit the wall and bounced back. "Really? Did you think a kid like me wouldn't have some sort of defense? How do you think I survived working with the League of Villains?" Tenya, who still couldn't move, asked, "Why are you protecting me?" When Izuku looked down at the teen in his energy shield, he said, "Good question, Tenya Iida. I've been watching you both during the USJ attack and the sports festival. I find you interesting and I think you'd make a great hero." When Stain tried to cut Izuku again, the barrier still held. "That child doesn't deserve to be a hero. He came here for revenge." Izuku said, "His brother, yes, I heard about what you did to Ingenium. But Stain, here's something you don't get. Tenya is not a hero. He's a student." When he said that, Stain stopped attacking. "He's just a student, he doesn't even have a provisional license yet. Killing him doesn't exactly fit your modus operandi." Stain said, "He's a selfish kid who doesn't deserve to be a hero." Izuku replied, "Yes, but think about how this would make you look. The man who only kills false heroes now murders innocent students. You may not agree, but in the eyes of the media that's what it will look like. They will make him into a martyr and that will forever tarnish your message," Stain said, beginning to grasp the boy's point. "You'll just be another bad guy," Izuku said with a smirk as he watched the killer get angry. He learned that Stain cared most about the message he wanted to share with the world. As soon as he said those words, the killer's aura and intent to kill became even darker and more violent. Izuku was scared and excited at the same time. This was just what he needed. "That's a great point," Stain said with a smile, "but what's it matter to you?" Izuku said, "Because Stain, I agree with you. I want to end this society's praised fake heroes too," the boy said with a sadness in his eyes. "I can't stand it either. People with flashy quirks acting like they deserve attention like they're famous. Being a hero is about being a hero. Fame and glory shouldn't play a role," he said, pausing to realize that he was back on one of his rants. Stain looked him straight in the eyes and said, "I didn't know that there was someone out there who had the same thoughts as me," he said. "But I can't help but notice you didn't answer my question. What's it matter to you whether or not I kill that child?" "Because while I agree with your goal to get rid of all the fake heroes, it's not enough. Your plan is incomplete and your ideals are flawed," Izuku told the hero killer. He knew he was going too far, but he was trying to make a point. "My plan is to create a true hero. A hero that would put all the others to shame." "And you want to be that hero?" Stain asked with doubt. When the man asked the question, Izuku laughed out loud. The boy laughed and said, "Me a hero? Don't be a fool. I'm a villain, sir. There's no hope for me becoming a hero. However, in my research I've come to the conclusion that villains are the one that make heroes." Tenya spoke from where he was frozen on the ground. "That's crazy." "Is it, Tenya?" Izuku asked as he looked down at his prisoner. Iida thought he was crazy when he said, when quirks first showed up, they were the bad guys who ran everything until some finally got tired of their rule and became the first heroes. The words, Even the hero you all love so much, All Might, was created by the most powerful villain I've ever known," made Stain and Tenya's eyes widen. "That was all by accident, though. The bad guys didn't mean to make their polar opposites," Isuku said with a lot of excitement in his voice. "Imagine a villain who knows all the right reasons to do bad things and who also knows what a real hero should be like. Imagine the hero he could make on purpose," he said, taking a deep breath after a long explanation. "That's what I'm doing here. I'm protecting and nurturing someone who I think would eventually make one of these great heroes." Izuku stood between the hero killer and the UA student and said, "Please don't kill him, Stain. I need Tenya. He has the potential and room to grow. He's just young and has more to learn about being a hero." Stain finally spoke after a short, tense silence. The killer told him, "I like you," and then gave him a big, scary grin that the boy thought was friendly. "You have good convictions. Much better than that fool you work for." Izuku stood up for his boss's apprentice and said, "Don't make fun of Tamura-san. He's still learning, we all are." Shigaraki was still an important part of his big plan. If he wanted to take over the Hero Society, he needed all the help he could get. "Do I have your word you won't kill Tenya Iida?" Stain agreed to back off and said, "Okay, I'll leave this pet project of yours alone." He then smiled when he remembered that his target was still bleeding against the alley wall. Killer glared at Native with daggers and asked, "What about him?" Native sat there still frozen with pain and fear. Izuku turned away and said, "Not interested." He didn't care about the low-level hero, but he was also still a little uncomfortable seeing someone die. While he was willing to risk his life for a student he liked, he wouldn't do it for someone who was already in Stain's sights. After a scream and a gross squelching sound, the deed was done. Tenya clenched his teeth and tried to stand up again, but he couldn't. He never had this much power over himself. He failed not only to get revenge for his brother but also to protect someone from a murderer who was being very mean. Izuku took an envelope out of his white hooded cloak and said, "As a thank you, please take this." He then threw it to Stain. "Once you're alone," he said, and Stain nodded. Then he jumped up the alley wall and disappeared into the night. Izuku fell on his behind and said, "Huh?" He said out loud, "Man, that was scary, wasn't it?" The boy asked Iida, who was on the ground, "How did you try to fight that guy? Just talking to him made me shiver." Tenya glared at him and said, What are we going to do with you now?" Izuku asked as he picked up the teen and put his limp arm over his shoulder. The strange thing about Stain was still going on. He said in a friendly way, "Don't worry, we'll get you some help." Tenya asked, "Why are you doing this?" Izuku didn't even look at him when he asked, "Didn't you hear what I said a minute ago? I'm trying to make real heroes, and I see a lot of potential in you," the bad guy told him. For a moment, they were quiet as he was carried out of the alley. "What were you thinking when you decided to fight the hero killer anyway? I knew your brother had beaten him, but did you really think you could beat someone he hadn't been able to?" Izuku asked as they got closer to the street. Iida looked away in shame as she asked, "What did you hope to achieve?" He didn't want to say, "I just..." Izuku knelt down next to him and said, "Yes? Look, don't think of me as a bad guy right now. I saved your life because I like you and think of me as a friend," he said. Iida looked at him like he was crazy, and based on what he said he was going to do, maybe he was. Tenya clenched his teeth and said, "I just don't know what to do with all this anger." As Izuku sighed, "All I want to do is find the hero killer and make him suffer for what he did to Tensai. What do I do with this pain?" The bad guy reached out and grabbed the other person's wrist, saying, "I'll tell you what you do with that pain. You hold it tight until it burns your hand, then you look at the world and say, 'Enough. No one has to feel this pain ever again, not on my watch.'" Izuku felt the same way after everyone turned down his dream. Once his ideal world was made, he was sure that no one would ever look down on him or people without quirks again. He let go of Tenya's wrist and said, "That's what a real hero would do." Izuku told him, "Now learn from this and say sorry when the hero you work for comes along." He had been searching the boy's pockets for his phone to do this. He looked through his contacts until he found a number that said, "Manual." "Wow, he has the hero's phone number. Tenya is very organized," Izuku said with a smile behind his mask. "I believe that blood sample from the hydrokinesis quirk came from him," he said. He pressed the call button and waited a moment while checking his power glove. With worry in his voice, Manuel asked, "Hello Iida. Where are you?" "Sorry, Iida is hurt and can't move right now," Izuku said happily into the phone as Iida watched with worry to see what the bad guy was doing. He could be setting a trap for the pro hero if he wanted to. He got into a tussle with the hero killer, but I was able to talk Stain out of killing him. Manuel asked, getting more worried by the second, "Who is this?" "Excuse me for not introducing myself," he said with a laugh. "My name is Apotheosis. I work for the League of Villains for now. Don't worry, I'm not part of this attack." "What?" Izuku happily hung up the phone and said, "I think you should start tracking this phone. Have a great night." When he felt like it, he could be very sneaky. "Tenya Iida," he said, "well, see you around. I'm excited to see how you grow from this." He then threw the phone on the student's lap and waved goodbye. He looked at Tenya and said, "Oh, just so you know, it won't matter if you go tell the police and pro heroes what I told Stain. I'll have already won by the time they figure out who I am or what I'm up to." He did this to remind Tenya that he was still a bad guy and wouldn't let anything stop him from getting what he wanted. Ta-ta. Izuku walked back into the alley and disappeared into the dark corners, giving Tenya a chance to let out a sigh of relief. Rocklock got out of bed in the hospital and said, "Lunchtime." Getting into a sitting position hurt him. A nasty reminder of how hurt he was. The strange thing was that the bad guys he fought knew exactly how to beat him, like someone had told them how his quirk worked. "Here you are," the young man shouted as he gave him his hospital food. This one was shorter than the last person who brought him his food. He did, however, wear the same scrubs, apron, medical cap, and surgical mask as the last time. He said, "Thanks," and took a bite of the tray of hot noodles. The waitress was still standing there, watching him eat. He saw. "What are you still doing here?" "Oh, me?" the kid asked, pointing to himself. "I'm just waiting for the drug to take effect." It was, wah, when Rocklock passed out and fell face first into his lunch. Izuku smirked and took off his surgical mask. That drug. He carefully raised the pro hero's head and put it on his pillow to make sure he was really asleep. For sure, the young bad guy pulled out a small syringe from the kit he kept on hand for drawing blood. It was a pain to hire a small group of bad guys with money and connections to put this hero in the hospital. They were told not to kill Rocklock and were given a detailed plan for how to fight him. Once he read the news story that the pro hero was in the hospital, it was easy for him to get into the man's room. All he had to do was figure out which hospital it was and pretend to be an orderly who brought food to patients. "Thank you for your aid," Izuku told the pro hero as he took a vial's worth of blood from him. The surgeon mask was put back on, and he quietly left the room when he was done. He looked at the guards who were standing outside the door. The guards nodded and said, "He's sleeping. We'll send someone with more food later." They didn't see anything strange. As Izuku left the hospital with one more blood sample, he smiled. U.S. meeting room for faculty. "Our sources told us about the name Apotheosis," Detective Naomasa told the UA staff to start. "Some criminals we caught also told us about him while we were questioning them," he wrote in his notes. "He's a kid from what we were able to gather, about the same age as your first-year students. He started out working with groups of small-time villains, none of them ever saw his face, and nobody knows what his quirk is either." Shota Aizawa said, "That's not much to go on." Snipe spoke up and said, "But we have a reason behind him now. From what Iida told us from his encounter, this boy seems to be under the delusion that he can create a true hero." "Yes, we knew that," Naomasa said as he looked through his notes. He suddenly remembered something. Due to the boy's supposed genius that the villains praised about, we came to a theory that he might have an intelligence-enhancing quirk like yourself, Nezu. "That's really scary," the little white animal said. "A brilliant mind being used for evil. Do you think that's why he's mentally unstable?" "Maybe," the detective said with a frown. "But I still don't get why someone with goals like the hero killer would join the League of Villains." Suddenly, the doors to the meeting room opened, revealing Toshinori aka All Might in his true form. A thin man with no flesh said, "Sorry I'm late, I went to talk to Iida." He then sat down in the next empty chair. It was a cross question from Aizawa. And how is he enjoying his detention? Tenya was locked up for a month because of that little trick he did with the hero killer in Heisu. Although the student should have been given a harsher sentence, because of what he learned about Stain and Apotheosis, he was given a lighter one. "Well, he's certainly remorseful and feels ashamed by his actions if that's what you're asking," said Toshinori. "He did ask something that concerns me a bit." Nezu asked, "And what did he ask you?" "Ah, it's nothing." "I'm sure it's nothing," Toshinori said. "It was something that the Apotheosis kid told Iida. He said that All Might was made in a roundabout way by a bad guy. It's likely that he meant All for One. This proves that person is behind the League of Villains. That man had told another bad guy how the quirk One for All worked, though, and that scared him the most. That was bad, and it made him think that he needed to quickly find someone to take over the power." Aizawa said, "I think we're making this too big of a deal. He's just a kid, it doesn't matter what he thinks he can do. He'd be stopped if he tried, no matter what his quirk is." Police Officer Naomasa replied, "If you say so. Even though it sounds easy, we'll get him when we finally find the League." The League only had 3 known members who were still on the run. There were no real names or faces to put with them. "Oh!" the detective yelled out of the blue, shocking everyone. Stain mentioned in front of Iida that he saw Apotheosis earlier wearing a school uniform, so that's something. Mad Midnight asked, "Do you know how many schools there are in the country?" "Yes, but he's probably a first-year student, so if you look through each school. If we can find a student that has a quirk similar to Apotheosis, Toshinori added. After that thought, Aizawa said, then we'll finally have a lead. I'll inform the boys at the office to look for a first-year student with any intelligence-based quirks and/or energy manipulation, he said. The faculty at UA agreed, saying it sounded like a good idea. League of Bad Guys, Izuku asked, what do I miss, as a glass broke on the wall across from him. Kurogiri said, not much, as he used his warp ability to clean up the mess. Ever since the attack on Hosu, Tamura had been having random temper tantrums. The news seemed more interested in Stain than in him, and they paid more attention to the killings of that man than to the League's terrorism. The teen asked, do we have any new recruits yet? Not at the moment, the bartender said. Jiren is working on that right now, Izuku said with a sigh of disappointment. The League of Villains didn't seem to be making progress at this point. He would probably leave them behind if things kept going in this direction. As soon as the newscasters said the words, Hero Killer, another glass hit the wall and broke. Kurogiri begged, if you could do something about this, I'd be eternally grateful. Izuku looked from Tamura to Kurogiri and saw worry in his eyes. Izuku smiled and said, okay. He then walked over to the boss's apprentice. Shigaraki gave Tamura-san a mean look and said, let's go get lunch. The bigger boy growled, why would I do that? Because you could use some fresh air away from all the newscast and I'll give you my current analysis on Stain, Izuku said. Fine, but you're buying, Tamura said. Since they were going to be in public, he took off the hand mask over his face. After an hour, they were dressed like regular people and walking through a mall. Izuku was at least dressed like a normal person. He wore dark green pants and an All Might t-shirt that fit him perfectly. Shigaraki wore nothing but black and wore his hood up. Stop looking at me like that, Tamura yelled. Izuku said, I'm sorry, I just haven't seen your face before. Have you thought about chapstick? Wasn't a joke, it was a real question. Shigaraki said, if you ask me that again, I'll turn you into dust. Izuku sighed and said, okay. Tamura looked at his All Might shirt with a questioning look and asked, do you have to wear his stuff? More than you, though, Izuku said with a smirk as they walked through the mall. No one would look twice at a kid wearing an All Might tee, but a guy dressed in a black hoodie in the middle of the day looks a bit suspicious, he said with a sense of pride. Just shut up and find us a place to eat, he told her. After a short argument, they went to a fast food restaurant, ordered something, and found a booth where no one else could hear them. Well, what do you think about Stain? Tamura finally asked as he bit into some fries. I got to know him pretty well during that Hosu attack, and I found out that his quirk lets him paralyze people when he licks their blood. Izuku put down his half-eaten burger and started talking about all the useful ways this quirk could be used. A very useful quirk in the hands of a serial killer. Tamura hissed, I'm not interested in that. I want to know why everyone's so focused on him. Focused how? Asked the teen with green hair. What if Stain was well known now? Just like heroes, bad guys come and go. After everything I did, the attack on UA and my attack on Hosua the hero killer just ignored it all, Tamura yelled as he broke up a French fry. Izuku asked, why not use that to your advantage? The media already thought the killer of the hero had something to do with them. Use Stain's influence and message to bring more villains to the League. The older bad guy yelled, I don't want that. Stain is undermining everything I did and what I stand for. Izuku asked him out of the blue, what do you stand for? Seriously, I don't understand what it is you want or wish to accomplish. Tamura yelled at him, how can you not know? You don't have a creed like Stain, you don't seem to have a purpose or goal. You say you want to kill All Might just because you don't like him, Izuku said. The question, why though? Made Shigaraki stop and think for a moment. Why did he want to kill All Might? What did he really dislike about the person? When you come up with an answer, maybe you can start to be the leader that Sensei is trying to help you become. Izuku then got up and left the restaurant to give All for One's apprentice time to think. Tamura Shigaraki was still a child, so if his words didn't finally hit home, nothing would. Izuku wouldn't be around for much longer, so he had to start thinking for himself anyway. The teen with green hair saw something pretty cool as he walked through the mall. One of his targets from whom he had not yet taken a blood sample. Ochako Uraraka was seen wandering around the mall by herself. What a lucky day. Izuku walked slowly toward her while pretending to look at something else. Hey, aren't you that American girl? It doesn't sound right to say, sports festival. Hey, I know you. Nope, that sounds pretty creepy. You look familiar. Oh, you're from the sports event, okay, pick that one. He stopped and looked at Uraraka carefully as he was about to go by. You look like someone I know, Izuku told her to get her attention. Oh, you from the sports festival? The girl blushed because she wasn't used to being stared at in public. Yeah, that was me, she said with a laugh and a big smile. Ochako Uraraka. That's what I thought. You fought Katsuki Bakugo, Izuku said. He remembered that fight well. You did great. But I lost, Ochako said with sadness. Oh, I don't think you did. You stood up to Bakugo. I think that's pretty heroic, he said. Anyone who stands up to that guy is a hero to me. It was her question. Do you know Bakugo? Izuku looked away as he said, yeah, I went to middle school with him. He used to bully me for being quirkless. Really? That's awful, Ochako yelled. She knew that Katsuki was a hot-headed jerk, but she didn't know he was that kind of monster. Picking on the people weaker than you is not heroic at all. It's fine, we ended going to different high schools so I'm free of him. Izuku smirked internally as he played his sympathy cards right. The two of them found a bench to sit down in the mall and started talking. Izuku gave the impression of a nerdy school kid, which was something he used to do all the time. He asked her things about UA, what the classes were like, but mostly about what All Might was like as teacher. Ochako lightly teased him for being an All Might fanboy based off his shirt and obsessive interest in the #1 hero. Not once was she suspicious of his act. To her he seemed like a sweet and honest boy, plain looking, but kind of cute. Ochako could definitely tell that he worked out with how his shirt seemed to cling to his muscled torso. Shaking the thoughts from her head, she asked him to repeat his question, hoping he didn't notice her flushed face. I said, why do you wish to become a hero? Izuku repeated. Something he wanted to know before he extracted what he needed from her. He slipped a hand in his pocket and palmed a small chloroform spraying device. He planned to lure Ochako to a more private area, knock her out and get a blood sample. Well, this is going to sound a bit selfish, but I'm doing it for the money. She had the decency to look ashamed. And how does that make you any different than glory-seeking assholes like Bakugo? Izuku thought to himself with disgust, hiding it behind his cheery smile. Well, it is the most lucrative profession in this day and age, he said as he tightened his grip on the gas dispenser in his pocket. I just want my parents to have an easier life. Ochako smiled sadly. That made Izuku pause. My parents have a construction company that's failing because of other companies having people with quirks better suited for the job. She held her fist in front of her. So I want to be a hero so I can use the money I earn for my parents. That changes things. He let go of the device in his pocket and smiled a real genuine smile. I think that's a very noble and heroic thing to do. Izuku placed a hand on her shoulder. I have to go now. Good luck with your goal. He stood up to leave. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, Ochako suddenly said. Oh, I'm Izuku Midoriya. It was nice to meet you, he waved at her. I hope to see you again, Izuku, she smiled at him. Oh, I think we will. Izuku smiled back. Indeed they would meet again. Perhaps on opposite sides of the battlefield. As Izuku walked away, he mentally added Ochako Uraraka to his list of potential true heroes for his new society right next to Tenya Iida. She'll be great. Thursday. Let's begin. Izuku grinned as he faced the forge. A big spherical-shaped machine with pipes and pistons running along the outside of it. He was able to hack into the city's power grid to give him the necessary energy to complete the process. The machine was basically a giant engine that used his formula to literally forge a stone into existence with the desired quirks built into it. The substance used was something Izuku invented that he called mortal resin, a synthesized organic liquid that would be hardened into a solid crystallized object, harder than the toughest diamonds. Please work. The boy pushed the button on the control panel to activate the process. This was the moment of truth. He'd find out if his theory and scientific formula was correct. The forge roared and bellowed as steam and sparks burst from every vent. Izuku took several steps back, wondering if the machine would explode. Unfortunately, his worries were correct as after 5 minutes fire and smoke exploded from out the sides, obliterating the mechanisms inside. Izuku shielded himself from blast as half of his lab was nearly destroyed. However, the small compartment next to the control panel opened and there sat a small round metal capsule. Sparks rained around Izuku as he slowly approached. Reaching out with his gloved hands, he gently picked up the metal orb. Giving it a turn, he removed the top half and was captivated by a blue light. With Kurogiri's warp gate power, the flash warp quirk, and several enhancing and amplified quirks. Rock Lock's quirk lockdown was combined with the conversion quirk. Now instead of being only able to lock a non-living object in space, the quirk could get both. Another quirk went into this stone courtesy of All for One. A failed experimental Nomu possessed a quirk called Epidermal Shield. A power that covered the skin in an invisible protective barrier that was far from impenetrable, but could be focused in a specific area of the body at the cost of lessening it the other areas. Unfortunately, the Nomu lacked the intelligence to use it to its full capabilities, so Sensei offered the creature's blood to Izuku along with the blood of other various failed Nomus. All of these wonderful quirks were combined together and the end result was a small blue glowing stone the size of a walnut resting comfortably in Izuku's hand. The Space Stone, he dubbed as he smiled down at the first of his Infinity Stones. Izuku let out a chuckle that evolved into triumphant laughter. It works! It works! He cheered. It destroyed the forge to do it and caused a city-wide blackout, but it worked. All his hard work and complex math finally paid off. Now if only I had a gauntlet to put it on, he would soon know when he finished the next stone. All for One asked, "What is this?" He had Isuku come back to talk about his progress, and after they talked, the boy gave him a box. When he opened it, it looked like some kind of metal mask. The front looked like a rough skull, and the back had tubes attached to it. Isuku showed off his new invention and said, "It's a special helmet I made. It's kind of like a portable life support machine you can wear. Sir, I wanted to thank you for believing in me, so I made this device so you can leave this room for at least an hour if you want to." He really wanted the first person to trust him. He looked up to All for One even though he was bad. Sensei smiled and said, "I should be the one giving you gifts. I don't know what you said to Tamura a while ago, but it seems he's finally growing and thinking for himself." Izuku was mostly pleased that Shigaraki didn't need him to help plan things as much, so he said, "Yes, I'm glad to see him properly motivated too." He did everything himself, which gave Izuku more time to work in his lab. That was helpful because he had to fix the forge after it blew up while making the space stone. "Are you sure you don't want me to offer you a quirk again?" All for One asked the boy. It was the same offer he made the first time they met. The boy smiled and said, "That's a very kind offer, Sensei. The old me would have jumped at the chance, but I still have to say no. I want to prove my point to the world that quirks aren't as special or great that everyone makes them out to be. When I defeat All Might, I want him to look me in the eyes and know that a quirkless kid that he deemed worthless like the rest of society beat him." Sensei said. It was clear that the kid would make a great bad guy someday. All for One took the mask out of the box and put it on the table next to him, saying, "As you wish. It could be useful a while from now." The boy jumped when the man said, "Good luck with your internship, Izuku." But he quickly remembered that the man knew almost everything about him, even what went on at his school. Izuku bowed and said, "Thank you, sir." He then left through the open door. Next day in Musutafu City, Izuku put on a big smile and straightened the tie on his dark green suit. Here we go. Today was the first day of his internship at Geonosis Tech, a big company that made things to help heroes. Most notably, they made battle robots and drones for training at Hero School. It looks like this is where the bad bots that were used in the UA entrance exam and sports festival were planned and built. First, they wanted to see a portfolio of his designs. Then, they wanted to see him show off the things he had already built. That's when they would choose what they would do with Izuku during the internship. His teacher Kinzoku said that he was the youngest student that this company would hire. They would either give him simple tasks to do or, if they thought he was good, more difficult tasks. Izuku walked past the big fountain outside and went up to the glass door of the tall Geonosis Tech building while carrying a metal briefcase. When he walked in, he skipped the fancy lobby area and went straight to the front desk. The man behind the desk said, "May I help you?" He smiled and said, "Izuku Midoriya, I'm here for the internship." "Yes, right this way," the man said as he led Izuku to the elevator. The guard tried to start a conversation with the boy while they were going up. "Are you happy to get an internship in the second largest hero support company?" "Indeed I am. Very happy." This was the key that would help him reach his ultimate goal. He was running out of resources from the League of Villains. Izuku also needed a new place to work on his Infinity Stones. He would have it if he could get the company's blessing and trust. When the elevator door opened, the two people got out. The guard took him to the Department of Research and Development, where the presentation was going to happen. As Izuku got ready to move into Geonosis Tech, he took deep breaths in and out. When he saw what the company usually made, he knew that his devices would stand out. In the evening, Stain asked, "So how are you going to change things?" They were both sitting on a roof in northern Musutafu City while they waited for the HID to come. When Izuku gave him the envelope, it had information on fake heroes that he planned to kill in exchange for letting the boy tag along when he did so. Magna Hero Magnetron was the first one they beat. The man killed the hero with a thick plastic sword that the boy had sharpened to a point. Izuku helped Stain lure the man to a place where there was no metal. The second was Mosaic Man, the crystal hero. A flashy hero who liked to show off. The man had a strange skill that let him shape and change glass. He only had to be chased into a tunnel under the ground, where there was very little glass, and Stain could kill him like an animal. "Let's just say I'm making a weapon right now," Izuku said as he took a sip of his drink. "A weapon that will make me the most powerful person in the world." "More powerful than All Might?" the killer of heroes asked with doubt. "Yes, definitely stronger than All Might," Izuku said. He said, "So powerful that everyone would have to do what I wanted, and anyone who doesn't meet my standards of being a hero, well, they'll be retired." The word, retired, sounded very bad. Stain smiled and said, "You have guts, kid. I like this plan, it's so simple yet brilliant." Izuku looked through his binoculars and said, "Oh look, our target is coming." Look, Christopher Skyline, also known as Captain Celebrity, was flying through the night sky. A hero from the United States who moved to Japan because he was in trouble in his home country. A very cocky man who only cared about how popular he was. Someone the hero killer wants to kill. His quirk, flight, would make it hard to catch him, though. With a grin, Stain grabbed Izuku by the collar of his shirt and pinned him to the wall behind them. Time to start the show. Izuku spat out, "Here I go," and began screaming as loudly as he could. He begged, "Please don't kill me," as tears ran down his face. Stain put his blade to the boy's throat and said, "Time to die, scum." They were right when they said, "Halt, villain." Christopher Skyline appeared floating above the building above them. He hit Stain hard and quickly pushed him away. He then grabbed the boy who was hovering around him and put him out of harm's way. "Thank you so much. He was trying to kill me." Izuku cried as he thanked the person who saved him. Chris said in very bad Japanese, "Not a problem, child. You must be the hero killer Stain. You're going after little kids now," the killer said with a grin as he watched the kids' plan come together. The American hero felt a sharp pain in his side all of a sudden. That made sense since he had just been stabbed there. Izuku got away from the hero's grip and jumped back up to the top of the building safely, while Captain Celebrity held his bleeding wound. Izuku smiled as he gave Stain the bloody dagger and asked, "Would you care to do the honors?" The killer took the small blade and licked up a single drop of the bloody liquid, with pleasure. Christopher didn't know what was going on until all of a sudden he couldn't move. Sadly, his quirk got out of hand when his body was frozen, and he fell off the side of the building. Before going straight down, Izuku waved and said, "Bye-bye." As he got closer to the edge to see where the body landed, he asked, "Can you believe that scum got away with sexual misconduct by fleeing to Japan?" He fell 15 stories, which meant he was either dead or his career was over. He made a disgusted face and said, "He's definitely dead. It looks like he landed rather awkwardly." As agreed upon, Stain spat, "Good riddance," as he gave his partner the dagger back. Izuku thanked him and put the rag in a Ziploc bag to use later to wipe the extra blood off the blade. He was here to help Stain because the quirk flight would help him. "Well, this was fun, but I'm afraid we need to depart for a while," Izuku said. "I got to get to work on my weapon, so I won't have time to do much villain work." With a serious face, Stain asked, "Do you really think you can change anything with this weapon of yours?" He wasn't asking him in an honest way this time. "Not only will I change the world, but I'll do it with the least amount of violence and bloodshed," Izuku said. The killer laughed at the kid's naive promise and said, "Now that's impossible." Izuku asked, "Are you a betting man, Stain-san?" "All I do is risk my life," Stain said. "How about this? I bet you that I can defeat and end the career of the number 2 hero Endeavor without killing or crippling him," Izuku said. "If I can do that, would you agree to come work for me?" That didn't sound like something Stain thought was possible. Without killing or crippling Endeavor? You think you can end him? Izuku laughed at him and said, "If it were easy, it wouldn't be a challenge." After giving it some thought, Stain agreed to make the bet. The killer of heroes asked, "What do I get if you can't do it?" "All my notes and analysis on any and every hero you want." He had a huge amount of notes on heroes. Now that Stain knew that, he would be an even better and more successful hero hunter. Stain told her, "You've got a deal." He knew the boy was smart because he had seen it for himself and would love to pick his brain for more fake heroes. Izuku pressed a button on his wrist device and said, "See you at the finish line then." Behind him, a portal opened. It looked like Kurogiri's warp gate, but it was not the same. For starters, it wasn't made of dark mist, and it looked like some kind of blue electric energy was holding it open. As he went through the portal, he waved goodbye to Stain. When he got to his lab, he frowned when he saw that the device he had used to connect the space stone was making sparks fly everywhere. His math seems to have been right. The stone could only work with living things. Anything that tried to turn off the power would blow up. All of that power needed a living thing to flow through. "At least I know it works now," Izuku sighed as he took the stone out of the broken machine and put it in the small vault he had built to keep it safe until he could build the Infinity Gauntlet. After that, he took a sample of Christopher Skyline's blood and put it in the machine that checks DNA. After that, Izuku sat down at his computer and started typing. He was only interested in how the recently deceased hero's quirk could be moved around and float. Izuku hoped it would work well as a replacement for Ochako's zero-gravity quirk for the Reality Stone since he missed the chance to get it at the mall. He felt like she was too much of a hero to attack her in public just to get a blood sample. It was getting harder and harder to put the traits of the quirky genes together in the computer game, especially for the Stone of Truth. He kept putting telekinetic and matter-changing quirks together, but no matter how he built it, it would always break in the computer. There had to be a way to make it fair. The good news is that he could use the Reality Stone to make a new kind of metal that would work great for the gauntlet if he added Kinzoku's metal bonding quirk. Sadly, he still couldn't figure out the answer. The Stone of Time too. It was always very close for him, but it still fell apart in the genetic simulation. What an interesting idea from Sensei about whose quirk he should use for the Power Stone. However, it might be hard to get a sample. That one was put on hold for now. He didn't know much about the Soul Stone either, but he did have one idea. It's just that getting a sample is not possible right now. If it were easy, it wouldn't be a challenge. To make more Infinity Stones, Isuku needed more DNA to work with. Isuku walked back and forth in the room where he was told to wait. The big tech show happened today. It was an event where companies showed off their brand new inventions and devices in a convention center the size of a football stadium. Some inventors came alone and rented their own booths or just hung out, hoping to get noticed and get investors and big companies to back their projects. It was here that Izuku Midoriya would speak on behalf of Geonosis Tech. When one of these big companies makes a support product, usually the CEO or head scientist shows off the newest thing. But Geonosis was not like that at all. It was much more humble. The green-haired boy was shocked when they told him they would rather have the creator show off his own work. Who better to show how a new hero support item works than the person who invented it? Asked the head of research and development. Of course, the person who invented it would know everything there is to know. He had only been in his work-study program for 2 months, but he was already the most popular intern at Geonosis. They liked his inventions and ideas so much that they were willing to pay him and also promised to pay for the rest of Izuku's high school tuition and give him a full college scholarship to the school of his choice if he worked for them. While Izuku agreed to everything, he asked that 70% of his current pay go to his mother, Inko Midoriya. He was as smart and creative as some of their smartest and most creative people. They were interested in what he would be like when he finished school. Because of this, Geonosis was ready to do almost anything to keep the boy's very smart mind. He even had his own office with high-tech computers where he could work on the plans and designs. During the summer, he could come by whenever he wanted because he had a pass that let him into the building 24 hours a day. Everything was too good for Izuku. With this company's tools at his disposal, the Infinity Gauntlet would soon be finished. He had already broken into the building's systems and put a secret code on his work computers that kept his real projects secret. He only had to give the scientists and important people something new and useful to keep them happy, and they wouldn't have known the difference. He was now waiting in a lounge in the back of the convention center. I was scared and nervous because I had never spoken in front of this many people before. Izuku did see the irony, though. Even though he wasn't scared to do such bad things, he was shaking and about to throw up from stage fright. And he asked the businessperson sitting next to him, "Excuse me? I need some air, can I step out for a bit?" She told him with a sympathetic look, "Just come back in 30 minutes. The panel will begin soon." She knew how scary it must be for a teenager, but she admired his bravery for doing it for the company. Izuku told her thank you and left the room to look around the convention and maybe get a drink to calm down. As he looked around the different booths, he didn't pay much attention to the independent inventors. Compared to what he made, none of them had made anything even close to impressive. Izuku got bored and went to a nearby table where food and drinks were being served. So he got a coffee. He thought that a strong dose of caffeine might help him get through this upcoming live presentation. Someone yelled from a long way away, "I know that logo." When Izuku turned around to see who was yelling, he saw a girl with strange pink hair and yellow eyes waving her arm and looking at him. He turned his head to make sure she wasn't seeing someone behind him. "Yeah, you." Izuku mouthed the word, "Me," and pointed his thumb at himself in surprise. The girl walked right through the crowd and stood at his table in an instant. She smiled at him and pointed to the tag on the front of his dark green suit that had the company logo next to his name. "That logo, you work for Geonosis?" She asked excitedly. "You work for them, don't you?" "Actually, I'm an intern," he said with a nervous laugh. Izuku was surprised for a moment by how excited and cocky this girl was. Izuku finally recognized her when she said, "Really? I tried to get an internship with them but they're so picky. I thought my performance at the sports festival would have been enough to get me in." Mei Hatsume from the UA support work class. Tenya Iida was the opponent, and she used him to show off her gear. Izuku smiled and pointed out her fatal mistake. "I remember that, you did well, until you gave up." "Huh?" Mei spoke up. Her train of thought stopped. "You had Iida in your hands, but you chose to play it safe and gave up when you were ahead," Izuku said, going into full analysis mode. "I mean, if you won then went on to battle one of the stronger students like that boy Bakugo for example, you could have showed off your inventions against a stronger opponent using improvised tactics. You played it safe with Tenya and the whole fight felt staged, so the companies probably weren't that impressed since they didn't get to see a real battle. They didn't get to see any real firepower from you, so I would advise working on that." He stopped to take a breath. Izuku quickly said sorry when he saw her confused and slightly offended face. "I'm so sorry. Sometimes I get talking and I don't know when to stop." "That's fine. I value any helpful criticism," Mei said with a laugh as she took in his notes to use later. "My name is Mei Hatsume, and I'm in the UA support class," she said. Izuku Midoriya, intern for Geonosis Tech, he said as he came back with his own. She began to ask questions one after the other. How is working with them? How big are their workshops? Do you do research and development? Izuku told her, it's great. I don't know how big all of their workshops are though, because I only design things and the engineers build them. It was her question. What do you design? Mostly support devices, not just for heroes but police as well, he said. Mei asked, like what? I can't say that because company secrets and all that, Izuku said with a small laugh. If you want to find out, why not attend the panel? Mei sighed and said, I wish I could. My sensei Powerloader was able to get a seat, but only for himself. He promised to tell me all about it, as she complained about teachers who were unfair and panels that only let certain people in. That's completely unfair, you're a student, he should have given you his seat. This would be a great learning experience, Izuku said. He didn't like it when smart or talented people were being held back. He quickly drank the rest of his coffee when he had an idea. Izuku got up from his table and told her, come with me. Mei followed him, not sure where he was taking her. He led her right to the front door of the convention center's biggest auditorium, where Geonosis was holding their panel. She didn't have to wonder for long. Izuku got up to the guard and said, excuse me. He then showed him his ID badge. This is Mei Hatsume. She is a guest of mine. They let them both into the auditorium right away. Izuku took Mei down to the stage once they got there. He told her, wait here. While the girl stood by the stage, Izuku went around behind the curtain. After 5 minutes, a woman in a suit came out and gave her a badge with her name on it that said, Spectator. He never came back. To Mei's surprise, the woman led her to a seat in the front row. This way, please. The girl with pink hair was so excited she could hardly hold it in. The new person she met, Izuku Midoriya, not only got her on the panel, but he also got her a front row seat for the whole thing. A voice over the speakers said, please take a seat. The presentation will start in 3 minutes. After a short time, everyone in the big theater was sitting down quietly and the lights went out. When the curtains came down, they showed a big black metal stage with a big door in the middle and several trapdoors on the floor. There was a spotlight on a podium where a teen named Izuku Midoriya stood. He didn't look the least bit nervous. He was introducing Geonosis Tech's newest line of prototypes. Mei's jaw dropped. He was also in charge of the panel? With a microphone on his ear, Izuku said, good afternoon, and welcome. A few cameras flashed. He was able to get up the nerve to speak by pretending that he was talking to his new friend in the front row instead of a big crowd. Behind the stage, someone from the company told the makeup artist, you should have combed his hair. I did, it's just messy that way, she whispered back. I had a really dull opening speech already, but let's skip that and get to the stuff you want to see, Izuku said with a smile as he put the note cards in his suit pocket. It then went down into the floor as he moved to the left of the stage. One of the floor panels opened, and what looked like a turret came out. It said, the first in our new line of capture weapons. Izuku called out, the trap foam gun, or TFG, as 3 self-moving mannequins came onto the stage. The gun then shot a stream of blue, sticky foam at the dummies, covering them all the way up to their necks. The audience clapped when the speaker said, as you can see, the targets are rendered immobile by non-lethal means and are ready to be transported. But they weren't really impressed yet. Do not be scared, we are just beginning, Izuku told the crowd. Next, he showed off the magnet, a device he had designed. A gun that fired a lot of metal balls around the mannequin instead of at it. Once it got past the target, a magnetized energy beam linked all the balls together, and they quickly closed in on the target, immobilizing its limbs. Izuku then showed off more devices that are used for defense and capture. Besides his portable shield generator, he also had a gun that made a small barrier around himself and new armor for police officers to wear that protected them from different quirks. He also showed them a firefighting tool that was meant to be worn on the back and plugged directly into fire hydrants. The tool would then pump water through a hose and shoot it out the other end. It was pretty much the power of a fire truck that one person could use. Izuku made everything he did for people who didn't have quirks or didn't have the right quirk for the situation. Izuku said, now for the finale. Just think of all these cool features in one machine, Mei said with excitement. It was like a big Swiss Army knife that could walk and move, with all the best support and combat tools on board. It was like a robot sidekick for heroes and police. As he spoke, the biggest floor panel opened up behind Izuku, and the robot he was talking about was lifted onto the stage so everyone could see it. This mechanized soldier was designed and built to fight a wide range of quirk users, the speaker said. The crowd was amazed by this amazing feat. A big, chrome robot with a big frame, heavy arms that looked like they were carrying weapons for capture, and huge hydraulic legs. The thing was almost 10 feet tall, and its red eyes lit up to show that it was awake. Look, Izuku said as he stood safely to the side as more robot mannequins came out. The robot turned, let out a sound that sounded like a watery growl, and raised its arms. As it moved, the trap phone was fired from its right arm, and the magnet balls were fired from its right. The robot hit the mannequins with nets, tethers, and every other kind of captured device you can think of. Isuku smiled as the robot fired a mechanical hose that connected to one of the fire hydrants on stage. "These robots are also made for rescue missions," he said. Then targets on fire showed up on the back of the stage, but the robot put them out with a blast of water. Infrared sensors, motion detectors, long-range scanners, and a complex problem-solving digital brain built to assess the situation and make decisions in the effort of saving human lives. Isuku walked to the middle of the stage and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the future of law enforcement and hero support." The mech stood behind him. The anti-villain robot, Titan. The robot, which had now been given the name Titan, raised its arm and saluted the crowd. The audience was so impressed by the company's newest and maybe best invention that they all started cheering. Some, like Mei Hatsume, cheered so loudly that they stood up. This version of the Titan is merely the prototype, but at Geonosis Tech we are hoping to eventually build a compactor, better version in the future, Isuku said. Let's ask the panel some questions now, and more than half of the people in the theater raised their hands. Yes, you, the teen said, pointing to a reporter who had been given a microphone by Expo staff. Geonosis has built robots in the past. What's the difference between them and this new model? As you know, those bots were made to help with training, Isuku said. They were made to be broken and smashed by weird students. The Titan is made to withstand powerful physical force, high temperatures, electricity, and magnetism. Think of them as an automated hero that you can program, he said, pointing to someone else in the audience who raised their hand. You say programmed, but what's stopping a villain with a computer or machine controlling quirk from turning it against a hero? The lady asked. I'd like to see them try, Isuku bragged, which made everyone laugh. But really, we're one of the best support companies in the country, and these robots will be impossible to hack once we're done. After a few more questions, he saw Mei Hatsume raise her hand in the front row and called on her next. Where did you get the idea for the Titan? She asked me. Isuku was shocked for a moment by the way she asked the question. He held his breath and looked back at the robot for a moment. This is a bit personal. You see, I always wanted to be a hero. Unfortunately, I was diagnosed as quirkless, and thus my dreams of being a hero were crushed at a young age, but I didn't give up, Isuku smiled. If I couldn't be a hero, the next best thing would be to make one. A hero who lived up to his name and image, he thought. For a moment, the smiling face of All Might, whom he now hated, flashed in his mind. Who knows, maybe one day the Titans will take the place of heroes and people will look back and say that Izuku Midoriya created real heroes. The crowd cheered and whispered that it was great that a teenager without any quirks had found his place in the world. After a few more questions, a reporter asked him to get close to the robot for a picture for an online story. That was the end of the panel. The curtains closed in front of Izuku, and he waved and stepped back as if to say, "Thank you all for coming." Mei got up to leave with the crowd, but she stopped when she heard someone calling her name. It was pissed. Izuku waved her over from behind the curtain. He said in a whisper, "Come here." Mei went after him, but she was shocked to see the robot still waiting. Go ahead and take a closer look. Izuku wasn't usually one to brag, but he felt compelled to let someone his own age who was interested in his work look at it. Mei started to run around the Titan and poke and prod all the parts and pieces. She touched the gears and hydraulics and asked, "How much weight can it lift?" "Well, I designed it to support a building for about 10 minutes. In case of a collapse, it can stall for time until everyone evacuates," Isuku said. "Were you serious when you said these things will replace heroes one day?" He walked around the machine and said, "Of course, but only time will tell. Unfortunately, as powerful as I can make these things, it will still probably pale in comparison to heroes like All Might. That's just something I'll have to accept." Mei told him, "This Titan is far beyond what I make." She then told him about all the gadgets she's made in the US so far. Department of Support. Izuku thought to himself, "And I thought I talked too much." He laughed at the girl's behavior. Izuku sighed as he looked at his robot and said, "That's an impressive list of gadgets. I haven't made nearly that many. Then again, I prefer quality over quantity." Mei complained, "I still can't believe how lucky you are. You get accepted as an intern at one of the best manufacturing companies, a high-level position in development, and you even got to show for them during the expo." Izuku told her, "You act like you haven't had your break yet." She looked sad when she said, "It's just, I thought showing off my babies at the sports festival would be enough." "There is no such thing as failure, don't let that idea bring you down." Izuku chose to be nice and remember her name for the next internship. He could only stay with Geonosis for a short time. When the summer was over, he would go back to school, and they would choose someone else for the next summer break. The boy would be sure to tell the business her name and that he liked them. He also wouldn't mind having her around when he fixed up this hero society. She is a smart engineer who would be useful to his future company. Thursday, and Isuku asked, Kurogiri, what's wrong? You text me when Tamura needs me all the time, he asked, shocked that the man had called him. Tamura Shigaraki wants to talk to you right away. Send me your location, the bad guy demanded, leaving no room for discussion. In a quiet way, Isuku walked into an alley. He had just come back from day 2 of the expo and was on his way back to his dorm room. This time, he didn't have to give a talk. Instead, he just hung out with other people and went to other company panels. Then the league called him out of the blue. Okay, Isuku said. He was feeling a little uneasy about this whole thing, but he told them where he was. After a short time, a warp gate appeared on the wall of this dirty back alley. In silence, Isuku walked through. As soon as he got out the other side, a pale hand grabbed his shirt and pinned him to the wall. When Isuku looked up, Tamura's face was pressed down on him with his hand over it. Ow, hello, Tamura-ak, the bad guy said as he grabbed him by the throat and held out his middle finger so that his throat wouldn't fall apart yet. You want to explain this? Shigaraki asked as he shoved the boy's phone into his face. There was a news story on the screen that said, Geonosis Tech presents new anti-villain robot. Below it was a picture of him from the panel with the Titan behind him. It hurt more when he said, oh, the expo. I think it went pretty well. At that moment, Izuku saw some new people in the bar. A blonde schoolgirl, a tall, dark-haired man with burned skin sewn onto his face, someone wearing an orange trench coat, a black top hat, and a mask, and finally a man in a black and gray bodysuit. Tamura yelled at him, answer the question, you jerk. Izuku sighed and grabbed the wrist of the hand that was trapping him. You're not seeing the bigger picture, he said. Tamura reluctantly let him go after he turned his tie into dust out of spite. Let me go, and I'll explain everything, he said. Did the thought ever cross your mind that I might be working an angle with this company? Shigaraki gave him a mean look and asked, what are you talking about? I'm deep inside a company that makes gadgets to help heroes, Izuku said with a sly grin. Think about it. Let's say a fight breaks out between heroes and villains. What if these heroes happen to be using my technology? But oh no, halfway through the fight all that technology suddenly stops working or worse turns against them. Shigaraki said as he took in the data. Who would win then in that fight? The heroes or the villains? I see, Shigaraki said with a cracked lip smile, finally getting it. He put his feet up and said, and here I thought you betrayed us. I'm sure Midoriya would never do something like that, so Kurogiri defended the kid. He liked how polite and well-behaved he was. Not if he values his life. Izuku thought, that was my favorite tie, as he wiped the dust off of his shirt and suit. Izuku was working on something secret, and Tamura was glad to finally know what it was. Taking down heroes with their own gadgets, Izuku said. He didn't realize it was still a false lead, which is too bad. All for One was the only one who knew what he was building. The phrase, that's so genius and so stupid, was said twice. Izuku asked Tamura, is he okay? He was not sure if the new employee had a personality disorder. He seemed strange and maybe even funny. Wait, are you supposed to be Deadpool? The phrase, I am not possibly not Deadpool, was either denied or confirmed twice. Izuku didn't answer when he asked, are these the new guys? He instead walked around the bar. That guy with the contradictory personality is twice, Kurogiri said as he began to introduce the new soldiers. Hello and goodbye, little man, she said and waved twice. The boy with green hair rolled his eyes and said, charmed. It was just what they needed, another crazy person. He said, my name is Izuku, but he stopped in his tracks when the orange-clad man tipped his hat appeared in front of him. He said, I'm surprised the League of Villains has a boy like you in their midst. The other person wasn't sure if he was being honest or putting them down. Izuku said with a sarcastic tone, lots of surprises today, and you are? I am the fantastical bad guy known all over the world as the Great Mr. Compress, he said, bowing wildly as if he were waiting for applause. Nice to meet you, my name is Izuku, he said as he walked by, not being too interested in the magician theme. When the boy waved at the man laughed in anger. After seeing someone interesting, Izuku walked over to talk to them until someone else got in the way. The girl smiled at him and said, hi, I'm Toga Himiko. Izuku walked around her and sat down on the stool next to the mysterious older bad guy. That's nice, he said. Izuku turned around and said, hello, to the injured man who still wouldn't look at him. I'm Izuku, but my associates call me Apotheosis. The man introduced himself as Dobby, while taking a sip of his drink and not looking at him. Cremation is a cool name, Izuku said with a smile to get his attention. It seemed like he had seen that face on someone else before, but he couldn't put his finger on it. They didn't know it, but Himiko didn't like being ignored, so she stabbed him in the back. It seemed like Izuku was in danger, so he slanted his body on the stool to avoid her blade. He then grabbed her wrist, put his hands on the back of her head, and slammed her face into the counter. At the knife she tried to use to cut him, Isuku told her, "You should really be more careful." He saw that everyone was looking at him while he had her pinned to the counter. Even Dabi was giving him a sideways glance. "What?" Kurogiri said, "We've never seen you get physically violent before," as he took the knife from the girl's hand. "Tamura and I didn't think you knew how to fight." At that, Dabi finally turned around and looked at him. "I didn't, but I learned a few things from my time with Stain." He had worked with Stain a few times, which Tamura and Kurogiri knew about. Tamura didn't like it, but Sensei told him that Izuku's relationship with the hero killer could be good for the league, so he let it happen. Dabi asked, "You worked with Stain?" He sounded a little interested. He asked, "A couple of times. Are you a fan?" Izuku was thinking about how he could use his link to the hero killer to his advantage. Dabi looked at the boy more closely when he said, "You could say that." As a child, Izuku didn't seem to have anything special about him at first, until he quickly dodged and hit Toga with the bar. He needs to keep an eye on this. He looked interesting, and he might know more about Stain. Himiko drooled while Izuku pressed her face against the counter and said, "I like him." She was also beginning to feel hot in this position. When she kept moaning and trying to press herself against him, Izuku got scared and finally let her go. Izuku asked Kurogiri, "Is this it, or are there more recruits?" The misty bartender pulled a file out of his warp gate and said, "The rest aren't here right now." He gave Izuku the folder with the list of their new bad guys and what made them unique and said, "These are the new recruits." Izuku said as he looked through the folder for unique characters to see if there were any that could help him. Looks like Tamura finally got the League of Villains he wanted. He could focus if only that creepy blonde girl would stop staring at him. Izuku had a frown on his face as he typed, "Reality Stone Computer Simulation number 76. At this point, he was so angry that he slammed his head against the desk and said, "Fail." It was really easy to get the Space Stone, but it was really hard to get the Reality Stone. If every mix of quirk genetics failed, there must be something missing. He had to have this stone because it would help him make the perfect mel for the Gauntlet. There wouldn't be much the heroes and villains could do to stop him once he had a way to use the stone's power. A voice behind him asked, "What are you doing?" This made him jump. He turned around and saw Toga Himiko following him. She wouldn't leave him alone after he pinned her in 2 moves in the bar a few weeks ago. If the cute girl who was following him wasn't a psychopath who wants to hurt him, it wouldn't be so bad, she said to cut him up to make him look cuter. Izuku was getting annoyed that people were always dodging and moving around to avoid her knife. How the hell did she find out about this place? "What are you doing here, Himiko?" Kurogiri, Tamura, and Sensei were the only ones who knew about this spot. She smiled and showed off her sharp teeth. "Oh, I wanted to know where you were always running off to. Luckily Shigaraki accidentally let slip where your lab was, so I snuck in to be with you, Izuku-kun." "Damn you and your big mouth, Tamura!" Izuku yelled in a low voice. Himiko smiled and began to walk around the lab, asking about everything. "Fine, just don't touch anything, and if you try to stab me again, you're out of here," she said. Izuku was getting really sick of telling them over and over, "Don't touch." "What is this?" she asked, pointing to something that looked like a box attached to a belt and had tubes and needles inside it. "Something I made to draw blood in the middle of a battle if necessary," Izuku said as he continued to type on his computer. It said, "Don't touch," next to a metal container that caught her eye right away. "Blood storage," she happily exclaimed when she saw the box that said that on the outside. Izuku jumped off of his desk and slammed the door shut. "Don't touch that, it's important to my research," he said. Himiko leaned in closer and said, "You like blood? I like blood too. Look how much we have in common." Izuku told her, "You have a fetish for blood." He knew about this from the time she told him about her quirk. For stealth and infiltration missions, it did come in very handy for him. After that, he did a full personality profile of the girl and found that she was completely crazy. He decided that a crazy person like her shouldn't be a part of his plans. "I analyzed the quirk genes in DNA for research purposes." They tried to glomp him while she said, "I love how you got me all figured out." He quickly dodged out of the way. "It's like you're inside my head. Makes sense because you're all I can think about." Izuku sighed in anger and asked, "Why did the psychopath have to develop a crush on me?" He thought about what he could do to get her away from him. That's when he had an idea that made the teen smile a little. "Himiko, sweetheart," he said first. "Would you like to do me a little favor?" "Sure," Togo replied with a smile, seeing this as a chance to get Izuku's full attention. He always talked to Dabi when he went to the bar. "What do you need?" Izuku wanted to laugh at how easily he could use this little troublemaker as a benefit for himself. "I need you to get something for me, and I think someone with your skills would be best suited for the job. If you can finish this task, you will be handsomely rewarded." He opened his files and looked at a picture of a girl with brown hair that he had met a long time ago. The night after Izuku walked through the woods with the person Shigaraki had given him to work with on this mission. Muscular was the name of the bad guy. He didn't come up with a very creative name, but his ability to change muscle fibers made him very strong. He didn't really care, though. The guy was just a murderous crazy person who was stronger too. The boy with green hair looked down at his brand new work gloves. They went over both of his arms and were made of titanium alloy. They were attached to a metal piece on his chest that secretly held the space stone. This mission to kidnap someone was a great chance to test it out. Izuku put on his new bad guy outfit, which included another white cloak with no sleeves to show off his power gloves, the same black pants and armored boots, and this time a mask that covered his mouth and could also be used as a gas mask in case he got too close to Mustard. He didn't bring his scouter because of two things. He didn't have time to make a new one because the old one was broken. 2. He knew everything there was to know about all the students and pro heroes who would be here. Muscular began to walk with them and said, "Hey, Shigaraki said you're the group's analyst. What do you got on this Bakugo kid?" According to Izuku, the person has blonde hair, red eyes, a short fuse, yells a lot, and explodes. He said this as if he didn't care. It was true that he didn't care that they were after Katsuki. It looked like Tamura was crazy enough to think that he could get the best student in Class 1A to join the League of Villains. Sadly, the effort would not be worth it. He had known Bakugo for a long time, and the boy was too stubborn to turn bad. Not even torture could break him. If they were successful tonight, all Tamura Shigaraki would have done was make UA and the heroes so mad that they will go after the League like wild animals. Since Izuku wouldn't be there, that was fine with him. He thought to himself, "It looks like my time working for the League is ending sooner than I thought." As he put the pieces together and thought of a way to make this work for him, he smiled behind his mask. He didn't want to leave the League for good, especially Dabi. That man was too strong to let go, but this is the best thing that could happen. Muscular stopped him in the middle of thinking and asked, "That it?" "Yup," Izuku said, and he kept walking a few yards away from the man with the big muscles. When they finally got to a good spot with a view of the forest, they saw a little boy with dark hair who was wearing a cap with two horns sticking out of it. Muscular made a mean face at the scared child and said, "Hey kid, you're not on the list." Izuku said, "We don't have time for this." He didn't like the look of fear on the boy's face, so he tried to change the direction things were clearly going. "Let's go." Muscular slowly walked up to the kid and said, "Leave then. This will only take a minute, then I'll catch up." Izuku got angry because he knew he was going to hurt the kid. Izuku told him, "Shigaraki told you all to listen to my orders if something goes wrong." This was what their leader had said before the mission. "I'm giving you an order, we are leaving to find the target." A muscular scowl said, "Okay," he said. Then he hit side Izuku in the chest, knocking him out and sending him flying down the hill and into the trees. He laughed and said, "Oops." He practiced the lie he would tell Shigaraki when they got back to the hideout out loud. I guess one of the students took down Apotheosis. He was scared as he saw the person who killed his parents coming straight at him. He shut his eyes and started to wait for death. The boy asked, "Really?" His eyes shot open, and he saw the back of a white cloak with a hood. "Sucker punching me?" Izuku asked. He let out a sigh of relief. He was lucky that the space stone's protective epidermal barrier had let most of that blow pass through him without hurting him badly. "What the hell is this?" Muscular asked. He didn't know what did. A smart alecky jerk showed up between him and the kid in a flash of blue light. Lines that looked like circuit board patterns started glowing a light blue color along the metal of his gloves. They said, "Insubordinate trash like you doesn't belong in the League of Villains." "That's right, you're fired," the bigger bad guy said as muscle fibers grew out of his skin and wrapped around his limbs like strings and ribbons. Izuku stood his ground and pointed his hand at the coming fist. "Die, you little jerk." Just as it got to him, a portal opened up, and the man's arm went through it. At the same time, a portal opened up under Muscular. As a result, the bad guy cut himself on the upper body hard enough to send him flying through the air. Izuku made fun of the famous serial killer and asked, "Is that it for infamous serial killer? This little test is going pretty well." It said, "You'll pay for that," and Muscular charged at him, punching him over and over. All of them missed Izuku because the space stone's flash warp power worked. Every once in a while, he would make a warp gate to send the man's fists back at him, slowly hurting him. Koda was shocked to see this strange bad guy with a hood fight the person who killed his parents with what he thought were super speed and portals. Izuku kept saying in his head, "Don't throw up." The thought of each flash warp turned his stomach inside out. He finally tripped because of feeling sick, which gave Muscular a chance to slam his fist into the boy's back and punch him to the ground. Izuku yelled, "Gah," as he was being smashed into a crater. The bigger man laughed as he pressed his fist harder into Apotheosis's back. "Nice try, but you're just too weak." It would have been over for him if the water hadn't hit him in the face. Muskrat saw Koda with his hand out and turned around. Izuku made a face when he saw what stopped that psycho from crushing him. Oh, that stupid child. Muscular glared at Izuku as he walked up and left his body behind. So you didn't want to wait for your turn? Fine. Eat this. Koda stood his ground again, this time facing the fist that was coming at him. Seeing that his opponent was off guard, Izuku Flash moved between them and made a portal to block Muscular's punch. Because he tightened his grip as soon as it went through, the blue portal shrunk and the arm got stuck. Muscular yelled, "You little jerk," as he tried to pull his arm out but failed. Izuku said, "I really can't stand people like you." He held up his hand to keep the portal open and locked. Bullies who pick on the weak just because they can. He finally thought of what the child's face made him think of. His own back when he wanted to be a hero more than anything else, before he turned bad. It doesn't make you strong, it makes you a coward. Muscular looked down at him and said, "What would you know?" He was still stuck. Like his own mean girl Katsuki, he told her, "I know you're not a man, you're a beast." His grip got tighter as he drew more power from the space stone. "And beasts like you should either be put down or declawed," Izuku said, closing his fist all the way. He then watched with morbid satisfaction as the portal shut all the way, cutting Muscular's arm at the bicep. The bad guy screamed, "My arm," as he held the bleeding limb. Izuku Flash warped a long way away while he was trying to sew the muscle fibers over the wound. He cocked his fist back and focused the epidermal barrier along his knuckles to make them harder. A faint blue glow covered them. "Cosmic," Izuku said as he flashed forward several times, making a huge moment. He hit Muscular in the face as hard as he could with that and the shield that had hardened around his fist. Instead of calling it after an American state or city, he took a page from All Might and named it Smash. The blow was so hard that Muscular's face almost caved in, and his jaw was definitely broken. Izuku watched as the bad guy fell back and immediately passed out. To be sure he was done, he walked over to the man and put one of his metal gloves on his chest. This focused the stone's powers so that the man's big, muscular body was covered in a faint blue aura that locked him in place. Izuku laughed as he found a rock to sit on and said, "Not so hard now." The metal gauntlets he wore were smoking from being used too much. Titanium didn't seem to be a good material for using the stone's power. He quickly took off his face mask and threw up all over the ground when he felt the contents of his stomach finally coming up. Izuku choked and said, "Damn it." The main thing that made him angry was that the prototype gauntlets weren't working the way he thought they would. His body wasn't getting the full benefits of the space stone's powers when the power was pumped into it, and it had a lot of bad effects. For this case, very bad motion sickness. The child that Izuku saved was not facing him when he asked, "What's your name?" The boy said, "K. Koda," while staying away from the person in the hood. Even though he beat Muscular, he was still bad. But that bad guy saved his life. He didn't understand this. "Do you happen to have a towel, Koda?" Izuku asked as he looked at him, sure that his hood would hide his face. Koda asked with tears in his eyes, "Why did you save me? Why you're a bad guy," Izuku said. "So just because I'm the bad guy, that means I'm completely evil." He tore a piece of fabric from the bottom of his white coat and used it to wipe his mouth. He then put his mask back on and got up. "No one is all good or all bad, Koda," he said as he slowly walked up to the scared child and put his hand on his head. "Just between the two of us I'm not a villain, nor am I a hero. I guess you said I don't fit with either of them," he said. "As for why I saved you, well, you kind of reminded me of someone I used to know." Koda looked up at him and asked, "Who?" "Someone who nobody believed in. A person that had dreams that everyone told to give up. Someone who was repeatedly called weak and useless." Izuku looked sad. The child asked, "What happened to him?" "He completely broke until there was nothing left of the old him," he said as he took his hand off Koda's head and walked away. Izuku waved his hand and opened a portal. Then he put himself back together piece by piece to become something new. "My point is that broken things can be fixed or turned into something else." He said goodbye to Koda and told him to stay put until someone came. Then he stepped through the space crack and left the confused child and Muscular's paralyzed body alone. After that, at the rendezvous, Izuku said, "Dabi," to him when he came through his portal. After Kurogiri teleported Mandalay close to him, he was able to get a blood sample from her while he was running around. He was so lucky to have that. He looked everywhere but couldn't find Ragdoll. He would have liked to see a sample of her DNA as well. Dabi looked down at him and asked, "Where's Muscular?" He didn't know where his partner was. He was going to endanger the mission. He even attempted to kill me when I gave him an order, so I dealt with him accordingly," Izuku said. Dabi looked at him for a while. The kid had a few scratches, but other than that, he was fine. How in the hell did he beat a bad guy like Muscular? Izuku began, "I saw what your quirk can do," referring to the blue fire he had seen earlier. He didn't know much about Dabi. "You're strong," but you're not a more famous bad guy. They always talked about Stain's ideas and how the world needed to be cleaned up of fake heroes. A cool thing he learned from their conversation was that Dobby really didn't like the number 2 hero Endeavor. Besides that, he didn't even know what the bad guy's real name was. Dobby didn't answer his question and turned to look at the line of trees. Our target should be here soon, he said, and just then, Katsuki showed up with Shoto, Fumikage, Mezzo, Tsuyu, and Ochako. When Bakugo saw the bad guy who made him look like a fool during the USJ incident, he yelled, "It's you. Let me handle this," Izuku whispered to Dobby as he saw an easy way to get rid of the other people and catch the Kachan. "We meet again, Bakugo. You know I thought you were the best until I easily beat you. I thought you must have low standards if you're the best," Izuku joked as Dobby laughed. Katsuki screamed in anger while the bad guy teased him. "Then you win the sports festival. It makes me wonder if you were holding out on me." He knew exactly how to get the blonde teen angry, and Bakugo ran up to the bad guy and threw a huge bomb at him, just as he had predicted. Izuku just waved his hand at him and opened a portal as soon as the bomb went off. Katsuki stopped moving when he saw his explosion go through a hole. He then let out a gasp when he heard the same explosion behind him. When he turned around, he saw what had happened. The other students were lying all over the place, far from the smoking crater. "Oops," Izuku laughed. He had turned his explosion around and hit the others again. "Looks like you blew up your comrades." "What was that person doing?" Bakugo turned around and yelled, "You jerk." Dobby said with a smirk, "I guess it will be easy to be the number 1 hero after he kills all the other heroes." As they kept making fun of Katsuki for being violent, he looked like he was going to kill someone. "Are you going to do it or not?" Izuku asked Bakugo as he looked past him. Katsuki was about to say, "Wah," when someone touched him on the back and he turned into a marble. Mr. Compress stood there with it in his hands. They had used the smoke to sneak up on their target. Compress was mad at Izuku for saying, "I just wanted to add a little theater, but you had to go and ruin it by giving away my position." Dobby told them, "We're not here to play games, we have work to do." Just when they needed it, Kurogiri showed up and opened a warp gate for them. The misty bartender said, "I take it the mission was successful. I have young Katsuki Bakugo right here." Compress laughed and threw the marble back and forth. Kurogiri said, "I could only get back Magna, Spinner, Toga, twice, and the Nomu." Izuku begged, "Please let's leave. I'd rather not be here when the pros show up." Dobby agreed, and a few seconds later, Kurogiri's warp gate wrapped around them. Izuku. As soon as they walked into the bar, arms wrapped around his shoulder. Izuku told Toga, "Can't you say my name out loud? We have a guest." He said, "It's fine that he can't hear anything when he's in marble form." Himiko held up a vial of red blood and asked, "Izuku, are you proud of me? I got what you wanted." Izuku thanked her and said, "Yes, that's great." He then took the vial. Maybe a small amount of Ochako's blood would help him finish the next stone. Finally, Shigaraki spoke up and got everyone's attention. "Can you and your girlfriend take this somewhere else? Do you have him?" "Katsuki Bakugo is resting soundly in my front pocket," Compress said as he patted his jacket. Tamura told them to get the chair. Kurogiri nodded and used his warp gate to bring out a big iron seat with several restraints on it. It was clear that this was meant to keep Katsuki in. Izuku took Himiko to the counter while they were getting that ready. He told her, "Okay, so a deal. You get to spend 1 day as me, and you get to keep the blood extraction device I lent you." Toga was strangely excited to hear that she would get to walk a mile in his shoes and keep his invention. "However, I'm going to pick the day." The blonde girl whined, "Oh come on." Izuku gave her a mean look and said, "Take it or leave it." Toga sighed and said, "Fine, I'll take what I can get." Then she turned her frown into a smile. "I still love you, Izuku." He replied, "You're sick in the head," and took the blood sample. "But you've been very helpful," he told her with a smile as he rubbed Toga's head.
So that's it for today. I will continue this story in next part. Till then, bye bye.